evening, everybody. Welcome to School Psych Podcast. My name is Rachel. I'm a school psychologist in Maryland. Hope that everybody's, had a good winter kind of break going on and is recharged and energized. I know that I am looking at a snow day tomorrow. So hopefully if you all listening are also looking at snow days and kicking up your feet a little bit and getting an extra day to relax and, get ready for the next kind of influx of assessments and crises and all that stuff. Put that in the chat and let us know how you're all doing. But I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca. I'm really excited for this topic to learn. The counseling stuff is always I feel like my weak point, and so I really benefit from listening to guests on these types of topics. So I'm excited for that. But Rebecca's going to talk to everybody about how you can participate tonight. So Rebecca.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. If you happen to be listening right now and joining us live, then all you have to do to participate is log into your YouTube account, and you can chime in with comments right alongside the video. If you're watching even after a delay at any point, when you comment alongside the YouTube video, those comments will line up and sync up with our conversation. So please do comment on YouTube at any time if you're watching the video. If you're like many of our listeners and you listen to the audio only on anywhere that you get podcasts, please feel free to either go to the video to comment there, or you can reach us on any of our social media pages, which is Facebook, School Psych Dear School Psychologist, or the School Psych podcast page. You can you can post a message under the prompt for this episode, or you can send us an inbox message or a direct message on either one of those pages. I made the move from X to Blue Sky and also Threads, where I have posted for this episode. So please look for me on Blue Sky and Threads. And I passively aggressively screenshotted the Blue Sky post on X, so it's there too. I'm going to do that for a while until more of us school psychs are on Threads and Blue Sky. Not a bad place to be, very friendly place to be, I've discovered so far. So I encourage you all to explore the psychs that are out there already. Please do let us know what your experiences are with DBT in schools, and any questions that come to mind if you have ever thought about using DBT or teaching DBT skills to your students. We'd love to hear from you and learn about your experiences on this topic as well. So I look forward to that conversation over time. And now I'm going to pass it off to Eric, who's going to introduce himself and our wonderful guests.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Well, we're excited to have two guests this evening, Dr. Minu Thomas and Lindsay Bourdeau. I first saw them speak on the topics they're going to talk about this evening at NIASP, and have been following Minu for a while on social media, and have the pleasure of getting to chat with her a little bit about some of these things. So it's really been fascinating to me to learn a little bit more about DBT and applying that skill set to accommodating students and to validating students with diverse cultural identities. So we're, I think, going to have a great discussion this evening. But let me introduce them just a little bit, give you some background information, because they both have some pretty extensive work and experience as school psychologists, as licensed psychologists, as trainers. So here's a little bit about them. Dr. Minu Thomas is Director of Consulting Services at Cognitive and Behavioral Consultants, CBC, in New York, where she oversees a large team of trainers and consultants, as well as trains and consults with numerous school districts, agencies, and organizations. She is a licensed psychologist in New York and certified school psychologist in New York and New Jersey, and also holds her diplomate in school neuropsychology. So she has had numerous years of experience as a chairperson for the Committee on Special Ed and Section 504, and most recently was a director of pupil personnel services as well. She holds a BS in psychology from Rutgers and an M.S.E.d. in school psychology, as well as her educational leadership, and also has a doctorate of psychology from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. Her research and work has been exploring executive functioning interventions in middle school settings, as well as multicultural competencies of school psychologists and its effect on service delivery to culturally and linguistically diverse students and their families. In many of these roles, Dr. Thomas brings her own lens of understanding and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's passionate about supporting mental health of children and their families through her strength-based and culturally responsive lens. Lindsay is a full-time consultant also at CVC, and she is a certified school psychologist and licensed professional counselor. And she's had years of experience working with schools and students of all grade levels. And she completed her bachelor's at Loyola, and where she majored in psychology and also minored in Spanish. And she earned her master's in school psychology from Fairfield here in Connecticut. She is extensively trained in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy, and has worked in several school districts in Connecticut as well. She has focused on supporting students and providing individual and group counseling while working within the school settings. She's developed and implemented district-wide DBT plans, therapy plans, and classes, as well as companion parent and teacher trainings, and has led staff and student workshops on developmental and social and emotional topics. She's been an active member of the school district's Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence Ruler Committee, and she's also worked as a licensed professional counselor in private practice. So, wow, welcome, Dr. Thomas and Lindsay. We're grateful to have you both here. And I wonder if we could start off just talking a little bit about DBT. I know some of us, especially us older school psychologists, may not have learned a lot about CBT when we were in training, and maybe not a lot about DBT specifically. What can you tell us about DBT and maybe this new third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy in general?
Sure, Minu, if you don't mind, I'll take the lead on this and jump in if I leave anything out. I just want to say thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here and share a little bit about what we do every day. So in regards to DBT, just historically speaking, right, DBT was developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan in the 1980s. Really, it was developed to work with individuals who were struggling with chronic emotion dysregulation, specifically individuals who were suffering from borderline personality disorder. So that was the population she was really targeting there. And in her work, I think you're talking about the third wave, and we're seeing how CBT has kind of grown over time. Through Marsha Linehan's work, she really started focusing on approaching these individuals with, just behaviorism, right? And that kind of first wave CBT approach, and learned that those individuals were really not benefiting from that approach because it was not acknowledging the emotional pain that they were experiencing. So that validation component was really not being honored in that approach. Leaning towards the other side, she approached those individuals then just really focusing on validation and acceptance, right? So thinking more towards shifting from just change-oriented to more validating and acceptance. And their individuals were also not finding success, right? So they're saying like, okay, you understand, you see I'm suffering, and like, now what? How does this get better? Right. And that really is what transpired into her developing DBT, is that combination of both. So what I love about DBT and that third wave CBT is the holistic approach. So taking that balanced approach of saying, yes, we are meeting our clients and our students with validation and acceptance, really understanding that emotional pain they're experiencing. And we're giving them skills to move forward, to change, to improve. And so that's really kind of where that transpired. And then, I think one of the things we've learned about DBT over time is that not just for individuals with borderline personality disorder, but also it really benefits anyone struggling with challenges with emotion dysregulation. It is a transdiagnostic approach, really targeting anything that has that as the center of the challenge or difficulty. So for schools, over time, it's been adapted to work in many different settings, not just schools, hospitals, other environments. And have to give a shout out to Dr. Alec Miller, our co-founder at CBC, and his work with his colleagues on really reframing and creating curriculum that can be implemented in the school setting. What we know is that our kids are really struggling, right? Mental health is continuing to be on the rise in terms of concerns with anxiety and depression. And I think what I love about DBT is that we can teach these skills in the school environment for our students so that as they face challenges, because we know life is challenging, that they will have skills to move forward and tolerate that challenge. So that's kind of where we've come as far as DBT and why DBT in the schools. And we can certainly talk more about what that looks like in the school setting as we continue our conversation.
Similar to Lindsay, I was also trained in DBT by Dr. Alec Miller in 2017 when I was a school psychologist, and I just fell in love with it professionally and personally. As far as students, as Lindsay shared, it's a skill-based curriculum, so I found the scope and sequence to really reduce prep time that we know that's not really there, right? So to be able to know what am I working on, what skill am I teaching a student, what are they going to practice and rehearse, right? And be able to share that information with teachers or aides or their parents. And knowing that it supports students with anxiety, impulsivity, depression, self-esteem, identity issues, right? Disordered eating and social skills. And it really just is a progression. And I was very honest and with students saying, I'm learning this with you, right? DBT is very much about vulnerability and fallibility. So I didn't feel like I needed to be an expert when I started doing it. On a professional note, I really appreciated DBT's premise of building a life worth living and using skills to really radically accept challenges and loss in life, right? None of us escapes pain. It's a part of life. And it can be avoided, but DBT really puts in skills on how to navigate and still find joy. So for me, it was both and, right? Professionally and personally. And Lindsay and I love being able to train school staff in DBT.
So question, what, being in the schools, what age group is generally used with, is across all ages? I feel like I've heard people say that, DBT isn't so great for elementary for the younger kids. Is that the case, or is that a myth? Or
Great question, Rachel. Lindsay, I'll start. Jump in. I get really excited about this because when I was trained in DBT, I implemented it at the elementary level. It certainly can be done, Rachel, but I understand the concern in early K-2 really has to be adapted to their developmental needs. But there is manual and criterion skills for elementary, and it really does work. But as the point is that it really initially was created for middle high school, right? But elementary school, it can be done, and I love doing it. Lindsay, do you want to share? Lindsay was at that middle.
Yeah, so I primarily, my years as a school psychologist was in middle school and have seen lots of benefits at the middle school level. And as Minu shared, we do have many schools who are implementing at the elementary level, and that K-2 grade level, there's just more adaptations to the work that we do, and it's there, right? We've done that work. We've worked with our school teams to adapt the curriculum. So it's just being a little more creative and getting that, more engaging curriculum, right? So that our students are bought into it. But what we have seen too is that schools who are doing this at multiple levels, how effective it is, because for those of you who aren't familiar with DBT, it is truly its own language. Developing confidence and competence in DBT takes time. And so what we've seen for our students who are exposed to curriculum starting at a younger age, right, as they kind of like grow and develop with the curriculum, they really internalize those skills much more. So there is some benefit, right, to kind of starting at that younger age.
And it can be taught at the classroom level, right? At the universal level. It doesn't have to be just in our offices, right? In groups or individual, which certainly can be done. But the idea that all students can benefit from it, because we know that sometimes we miss kids, right? They don't come up on behavior issues or academic issues, and parents will share with us like, yeah, but like they're melting down at home, they're highly anxious, and those are not students who are often referred. So I also love the idea with DBT that it can be taught universally without the need to be identified. Of course, that requires staffing and support in schools to be able to do so as well.
That brings me to a question that I had. I actually did a webinar, like a one-day webinar with Dr. Miller, and I remember him saying that the typical model for school psychologists is that by the time a student gets to your office and has individualized time with you, it's part of the WTF model, the wait to fail, until there's like a really big problem or challenge. And so it makes me think about how useful it would be to have a system, almost a culture in the school building or the district that uses the language of DBT so that everybody is on board. And then if you're working individually with a student, how much more powerful that could be. But could you explain a little bit the difference between dialectical behavioral therapy kind of writ large and DBT in schools? What are the main differences between how it is as an individualized therapy versus its use in schools?
I'll jump in here, and Minu jump in and add anything I leave out. When we talk about so there's two models that we deliver in school. One is our universal model, which is our tier 1 model, all students access, and that can be done through classroom lessons. So certainly that model looks slightly different than what we would kind of see in an outpatient DBT model. Our comprehensive model, which is our tier 2, tier 3 approach, looks a little more similar to what you would expect in an outpatient kind of program. The modes to DBT are individual therapy, skills group, skills coaching, and consultation team. All 4 of those modes happen in the school setting, and they happen in outpatient. So we're not really missing anything there. The difference is skills coaching is obviously going to look very different in the school setting as it does in outpatient DBT. Outpatient clinicians are on call 24/7 to do skills coaching with their clients. That certainly does not happen in the school setting, nor would we want that to happen. I'm sure everyone's like, oh, right. No, there's no 24/7 coaching happening. But we do skills coaching, and that looks a little bit different. So that means that students can access you during the school day specifically for skills coaching. So that happens. We do consultation team. So Rebecca, I know you've had experience on a consultation team or hearing about that. When I started and was introduced with DBT in the school that I worked, I was on a consultation team with a CBC consultant. We met regularly. That also happens outpatient. So there's a lot of overlap. I think the difference is like the level of intensity. The skills that we're talking about are certainly happening. And I will say in outpatient, there is a family component that occurs as well, which doesn't always happen in the school setting. And there are school teams and our more therapeutic support programs who utilize family groups as well. So there's some small differences there, and the skills that we're teaching are the same. The content is the same. I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
Can you talk just a little bit about the dialectic and some of the background specifics about DBT that that school psychs might not be familiar with, maybe rational mind and some of those specifics?
Sure. So just to introduce a little bit about dialectic, so this idea of two opposing things can exist at the same time. Both can be true. In DBT, one of the biggest things that I find when we do trainings, our staff walk away with is this idea of we don't say the word but. So when we are saying certain statements, we replace the word but with and. So one of the core dialectics for DBT is I am doing the best that I can and I need to do better. So this idea of balancing both acceptance and change is really kind of that foundation that we really build off of when we teach our DBT curriculum. There are 4 modules that we teach. 2 fall on our acceptance side of the dialectic and 2 fall on our change side. So when we talk about the skills that we teach mindfulness, distress tolerance. Those are our 2 acceptance strategies that we teach. And then we also teach emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness. So that falls on our change side. So we're constantly balancing this idea of dialectic. We also work with teens to talk about walking the middle path and being able to see both sides, finding the truth in both sides. So that is definitely something we do to orient our students. And Eric, you're talking about the 3 states of mind, which falls under our mindfulness module, where we really teach students to recognize what state of mind they're in and how to get themselves to wise mind when making decisions about how to behave. So we really emphasize this idea of we want our students to have more awareness of their internal experiences. So what am I feeling? What am I thinking? Do I have any urges to act in a way that's unhelpful? And so we first teach that awareness through our mindfulness module. And that's where we introduce this idea of states of mind, helping our students recognize, am I in my emotion mind when I'm making this decision, in my fact mind? And if I need to make a decision about how to behave, how do I get myself to wise mind, which is the place where we all have within us and is the place we want to be when we're making decisions on how to behave. So that's, one small piece of the mindfulness module that we teach, but really, really emphasizing this idea of increasing awareness for our students so that we can then teach them those strategies to get them to wise mind, to make more effective decisions and more adaptive coping skills.
One way to do that is to validate students, right? As adults, often inadvertently, we can invalidate students and create invalidating environments, which can really lead to a lack of sense of belonging. So validation can look in many ways. We do it all the time, right? We can validate emotions, we can validate thoughts, we can even validate urges when students don't act on it, right? And behaviors that are consistent with what's going on in their lives. We can validate the importance of the problem for that student and how difficult it is, right? From an adult context versus looking at it from the lens of a child, and the emotional pain that they're going through, including when a student is out of control, right? Students do not want to be out of control when they're having tantrums or meltdowns and difficulties. That's also really painful, and validate the experience to get commitment to say, how can we change this? And building motivation for them. Because the idea behind invalidation can lead to, right, we know in terms of anxiety, school refusal, not being connected, not having friends, and that's school's such a place for all of that, right? We're not just coming to learn. So the premise is we teach a lot about validation. What does invalidation look like? How do behaviors stem from when students are in invalidating environments and comments that are made to them?
I really like that. And I'm just, as I'm thinking about DBT at various levels and some of the things that you mentioned, sort of taking the DBT approach and applying it to schools. How, I know, Minu, you and I have talked a little bit about some of this. Can you talk a little bit about your journey into sort of developing and applying those skills to schools? Because I think the road wasn't always clear, right? I think you both have sort of paved the way in a little bit. And I'm wondering, as school psychologists, rather than reinventing the wheel, how can we learn from you in that respect, and in terms of taking these ideas into the schools?
Sure. So I'll share that, like, my experience of growing up and my lived experience have really helped me apply DBT to support the notion. DBT is really big on self-disclosure and the power of storytelling, right? And we know that, like, sometimes in other modalities we're taught, don't share anything about yourself, right? It's all about the students and family, and there's a disconnect there. So that's one shift. I think for me, I grew, my personal experience, I grew up in South India in a state called Kerala. I immigrated to this country when I was a child. I grew up as a Syrian Orthodox Christian, but like had friends who were Sikh and Muslim and, Hindu, and learned multiple languages. I share that because, like, multiple truth, multiple ideas, dialectic, right? How can we validate experiences? And then as my journey continued, my family's immigration was staggered, right? My father struggled with his own acculturation in this country. So all of that, like, understanding my background is critical to know if I'm sitting in front of you as a student, right? Not all skills and services can work the same way. So for me, I appreciate multiple truth, ideas, opinions, and welcome opposing ideas. So DBT is just like the beautiful balance of that. So when it comes to kids, right, like, none of us are experts in all cultures and religions and identities, like really getting to know students and their stories and their families' journeys. And one way that we train and teach it is the utilization of, like, identity webs, right? How do we really understand and explore social identities? How do we understand students' wishes, their hopes, their fears, and asking questions like, how does the world see you and how do you want to be seen, right? That's connected to creating a validating environment. I'm of a big belief that, like, getting to know activities that are void of social identities really perpetuates colorblindness, right? What I shared with you, if that was not shared, you wouldn't really know me. And that really misses a huge part of who I am. So in DBT, like, utilization of beginner's mind, that none of us are an expert in others' experiences. We can really affirm identities and know that, like, if there's an aspect that's causing pain, we can work on that with students and families. And then the other piece, like, accumulating positive experiences. How do we help kids and families have joy, right? I know there's times where I talk to parents on the phone and say, listen, when your child comes home, do not have this conversation because we've had it so much in school, right? The principal has the APS. I actually want you to just do something, like, joyful and light. These things happen, right? Giving grace and being fallible. So it's connected in, like, multifaceted ways, right? Both within ourselves, students, and parents, so that it reduces that burnout in that way, right? As school psychologists, because our roles are, like, we're constantly moving. There's so much happening. And the idea is that, like, if we don't take care of ourselves, right? We talk about that a lot, but DBT is very much about, like, how do we check in with ourselves? What are judgments or biases that I'm bringing up, right? What is causing distress for me right now? And how do I reduce that so I can really show up? So and I'm kind of going all around, but, like, it's connected because like you can't treat, support students without really looking at yourself. And I think that's where I really started and worked on myself, on being able to share more, being able to engage with parents at a deeper level than just the evaluation, just the IEP process, really understanding what are their fears, what are their hopes, what's missing here that I'm not understanding. So I'm a big premise on like, we can't talk about harm without talking about strengths. So my big premise in DBT is like, how do we create validating environments? How do we create environments that students want to come to school? That there's that one adult that's so excited to see them. And often it's us, right? When we go back to school tomorrow. I know, Rachel, you're not going back, but like on Tuesday when you go back. So yeah, that's the piece. And as Lindsay talked about, like, how do we connect that to wise mind, right? How do we help kids when they're in emotion mind get to wise mind so they can validate themselves as well?
I was going to jump into Minu. This is taking it like on a little different direction. And when Eric, you were asking about kind of like our journey and bringing DBT into the schools, I think for me, it took some time, truthfully, for me to really kind of own and understand the DBT approach. And when I did, my mindset and my approach as a school psychologist shifted tremendously. I will like preface, I also think becoming a parent added to that as well. But really that idea of balancing that approach with our students, balancing acceptance and change. I tell this story a lot with my teams that I work with. And just this idea of when I started and went into the field of psychology, I went in really with this goal of supporting students, being compassionate, meeting them with validation, all of the things that we all, believe so heavily in terms of supporting students who are struggling. And looking back at those first few years as a school psychologist and reflecting, and knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know that I was doing the best at my job, right? Having some judgments of myself, because what I really missed in those early years as a school psychologist was, yes, you can be compassionate, you can support, you can validate, and you need to hold the line, and you need to have expectations. And right, taking away the things that create the distress and discomfort isn't what's helping, right? We often, as a parent, I can say this wholeheartedly, right? When my daughter is struggling, I want to take away whatever is causing her pain. I want to make it go away. I want to fix it for her. And I often felt that way with my students, right? Teachers upsetting them, they, need some help in how to problem solve. I say, don't worry, I'll email your teacher. I will fix this for you. Everything will be okay. And in that moment, it is okay, right? In that moment, they feel a sense of relief. I, as a psychologist, feel like I've done my job, or as a parent, I feel like I've done my job. It's what happens over time. It's that long-term result that, am I teaching them skills? Am I telling them that, yes, you are anxious and life is so terribly hard. You're gonna face challenges in your future, and you have skills and you're capable of getting through this. And so that shift for me, when I kind of took that dialectic and I said to myself, where can I find that balance in the work that I do with my students as a parent, right? And recognizing and holding that other side that for many of our students who are struggling, we are over accommodating in these moments, right? We are taking away the distress, the discomfort, because we want them to feel better. And where are we pairing it with skills? So for me, that shift was really enlightening and eye-opening. And that's where I find so much of my passion now in talking about DBT and utilizing it in the school setting, right? It's finding that, and then also being able to say, guess what? We have skills that we can teach you. that will help you get through this. And for parents as well, right? Because they need that support through those challenges as well.
For students, and similar to Lindsay, like how do we help students be upstanders, right? How do we create agency for them? So when things are happening to them, that adults aren't coming to their rescue all the time, because we know that that creates learned helplessness. So in DBT, like the coaching model is really used to say, what skills have you tried, right? If you haven't, let's try one now. I want you to go back and try this. Right. And then similarly, when like students are subjected to biased comments, like based on any aspect of who they are, right? Race, religion, sexual orientation, their disability, their gender, it erodes their sense of self. And adults can certainly come to their to support them, and that's needed. But we can also teach kids interpersonal skills on how to advocate for themselves in the moment. So they're not carrying that home, and it's not building and festering to the point where then we know that understandably there might be some acting out behavior. So how do we help mitigate like when stereotypes come up, right? How do we help students stand up to microaggressions, right? The DBT fast skill really helps with that, right? Being fair to yourself, stick to your values. You don't need to apologize if you didn't do anything wrong, right? And be truthful, just name it. And that requires practice, some rehearsal, which like similar to Lindsay, like was a shift for me. Like I'm not coming to the rescue, or a teacher isn't. We're going to work on this. We're going to coach. I'm going to coach you. We're going to role play. So next time this happens, you can utilize it. It's a great like cope ahead, because we know that my kids are going to experience challenges, and we can't create a bubble around to protect them all the time. So I personally love the interpersonal module for that. It's creating agency in a way that I didn't know until I was an adult. I'm like, wow, this is great. Oh.
I love what you each pointed to when you described, well, Lindsay, you talked about how a reflex of an adult is often to take away the distress or the pain or the discomfort of our child or student. And yet, even though it's kind of out of care and concern and hope for an outcome, a more comfortable outcome, it's also so invalidating. Like you said, Minu, like it's so invalidating to kind of, in not so many words, tell a child it's not okay to be sad. I cannot tolerate your sadness. And if I can't tolerate, you shouldn't tolerate. And it becomes this outcome focus. The goal is to feel happy. And so then our kids end up striving to show us that they're happy when they're not happy all the time, because no one's happy all the time. So I like how you described the dialectic as first being applied to yourselves, first being aware of your internal and external multiple truths. And I've been lately exploring ACT, and it's so similar in that they're both third wave branches of CBT. They have so many similarities, but lately the ACT folks have been talking a lot about the difference between process-based therapies, which are much more behavioral, and older outcome-based therapies, like can we reduce symptoms? And what you're saying makes me think of DBT, like teaching these skills, accepting life as it is, and teaching skills and applying skills, even though life will continue to be as it is, as a very process-based focus. Like we're looking to just gain skills. Can you talk a little bit about how DBT people see the process of being more effective interpersonally, or but just generally in life?
I don't know, Rebecca, if this answers your question, but certainly ask along the way. One thing I'm thinking as you're talking, right, is this idea of we often share to our students when we're teaching distress tolerance skills that when we use a skill, the goal is not to go from being extremely dysregulated to being not dysregulated at all. So we often we'll use a S.P.D scale. We'll say Where are you? 0 to 100. 65 and above is considered crisis, where you're going to tap into those distress tolerant skills. Our goal is that you get, let's say you're a 95. If you get to a 90, hey, guess what? It worked, right? Because there's this expectation of, right, and I'm sure you all in a school have experienced this, right? You say to a student, what have you tried? They say, everything, nothing works, right? Nothing worked. And so what we really try to do is reframe that expectation. We're looking to lower that level of distress so that you can use more effective skills, so that you can act in a way that makes things feel better for yourself, not necessarily are you going to have no more symptoms, feel completely great, right? And ready to go back to class after you try this skill. So that really is part of what we teach, is this idea of, right, we are using these skills all of the time, right? This is constant. We are going to, you might have to use a distress tolerant skill a few times before you're ready to return back to class. And if it's lowered it even just slightly, it has been effective, right? So this kind of ongoing conversation that no matter what, we are going to experience pain, right? And that is part of life. What we don't want is we don't want our pain to contribute to our suffering, right? So if we can decrease a little bit of that discomfort, right? The idea then is that we're not going to contribute to any long-term suffering. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, I love that notion that the outcome, whatever it's going to be, is kind of secondary to the process of learning and applying the skill and using it when it makes sense. So that's so helpful, because it's almost as if we were to focus on lowering that distress to a certain number or a certain degree, it almost becomes more elusive, because we're doing the same thing. We're telling the child that they should not feel the way they feel.
Right. And what we're saying is, like, you're going to feel that way, right? This is part of life, and you have the skills. You are capable. I think the other thing, Rebecca, when you talked about kind of like sending that message to our children or our students, right, and that invalidation, right? When we rescue, what we're actually doing is we're confirming to the student that you're right. This is too hard, right? You can't do this. And then they start to internalize that, a little bit of that stereotype threat. They start to internalize that they aren't capable. They don't have the skills, right? What we want to do is shift that dialogue and say, it is hard, and you have the skills, and you're capable.
The other piece I'll add, when there is behavioral concerns that come up with DBT, we utilize what's called behavior chain analysis after, right? And it's a non-judgmental approach of, all right, tell me what happened, right? If it was a movie, what thoughts did you have? What urges did you have? What emotions, right? What were you trying to change? And we really ask students, like, what are some vulnerabilities that happened today? I didn't sleep well, I woke up late, right? My dog's sick. So that adds to what occurred during the school day. And we work with them on, all right, so next time, right, what preventive strategies can be put in, and how do we repair harm if that's been done? So the process piece, like regardless of the outcome, we're still working through skills with kids. And then the idea of like radical acceptance, right? And this like blew my mind to talk to kids in this way. Like, there's 4 ways we can radically accept challenges in our life. We can figure out how to solve a problem. We can change how you feel about it. We can accept it. And you can stay miserable or make things worse, right? Like, the idea of not doing something or making something worse is a choice, which took me a while as a school psych to say that to elementary school kids, but there's the freedom of, right, choices there in that regard too. So in that piece, we work on like looking at pros and cons of acting on impulsive urges. There are pros of acting on impulsive urges. We as adults sometimes are like, I was guilty too. lecturing kids on why they should not be doing something versus helping kids like, what is a pro right now of running out of class? What is the pro of not coming to school? Something's working there. Helping them understand and then looking at the cons and why this is not sustainable and what's the impact. It's really empowering the student more so. Rather than like, we know the life movie of our kids, right? But we're trying to help them see it and work through that.
And Minu, I think you highlighted too this like cycle that we see and we focus so much on when we're doing DBT work is this idea of avoidance escape behaviors, right? And for all of us who have done FBAs and looking at functions of behavior, right, we know that oftentimes behaviors serve a function. Many times it is to avoid or escape the experience, right? And what we see in DBT, right, is that it's that aversive emotional state that they want to avoid and escape. Those behaviors can look like so many different things. It can look like school refusal, class avoidance, binging, purging, self-harm, ideation, right? As they get older, it can look at like drug use, things like that. And what we really want to do is kind of show our students that if we intervene, right, in that place of distress, right, we want to intervene in that emotional experience so that they're not engaging in that problem behavior, because it does work, right? We want to replace it with more adaptive coping skills. So what can we do so that we aren't acting on the urge to leave class, right? Where can we kind of plug in those skills that we've taught you so that you don't engage in those ineffective behaviors?
That whole notion of distress tolerance was such a revelation to me, because I've worked for years with kids who are school avoidant or struggling with anxiety, and finally understanding that they may be avoiding the emotion that's attached to the difficulty with attending school, that it's not necessarily an event at school that's causing the distress, but I can't handle the stress and emotions, and so I'm just not coming to school. And once, with a couple students, once we came to realize that that's what was going on, we set up something I talked to Rebecca about and learned from her, a bravery ladder approach, where at each rung we're providing enough support for the child, but not too much so that we're taking away the problem or the distress, but trying to accommodate them at each rung and finding out what is it that you need as you attend school, as you enter the building, as you enter class, as you each step of attending school that seems to cause distress. So it was really a kind of a mind-blowing experience. Like, oh my gosh, this is, it made so much sense. And we had almost, I don't want to say immediate results, but we had positive results within a month or so with kids who had chronic absenteeism. It was really surprising.
And I think that idea, Eric, of gradual exposure
yes.
is what's so important, right? Certainly, and we say this all the time in our presentations, like, we do not recommend you go to school tomorrow and for your school refusal kids, you say like, all right, I know what you're doing. Let's get back to school, right? That is not realistic. That's not going to happen. It's gotten here because certain patterns have formed. And so undoing that takes a lot of time, and it's small. It's really being intentional, making those small steps towards progress, towards moving forward, and reinforcing each step, right? So if it is for your school refusal kids, it's getting them to just come to the parking lot, right? And being really explicit and saying, we're going to do this for the next week. This is the expectation, right? And you celebrate, reinforce, what skills are you using? Amazing, right? Like, and then moving forward and being intentional about what the next step is. I think what we see often is that we start those gradual exposures. Once we get them in the building, we stop, right? They're here, right? And then what ends up happening is sometimes we stop at partial days. Sometimes we stop at they're coming to school and they're not going to any classes, right? And they're in our offices all day. And so it's really seeing that through to get them back, right, to where we want them to be. And there are times that accommodations make sense, right? And they're realistic and they fit, right? And there are times when we are inadvertently allowing or reinforcing that escape behavior to continue. So I think often in our presentations, our goal is increasing our own awareness as clinicians to say like, okay, are we really being intentional about what is kind of reinforcing this behavior and how can we move forward and teach them the skills to get back to where we want them to be.
And part of that is, as Lindsay said, is also raising awareness for teachers, teachers' aides, right, parents and guardians, because when a student avoids and an adult rescues, the student and the adult's anxiety are lowered because the problem goes away, right? And then there's a negative reinforcement cycle, and then the student engages in that again. So oftentimes when we work with parents, I think we teach parents and teachers how to tolerate their own distress, because it doesn't always feel good, right? But the most loving thing we can do is to push a student at the level that they're comfortable and to make that next step.
I think that's so important. And I'm thinking back to a case, that I've had this school year even where, a kid who's very anxious and struggling to come into school. Once we're in school, we seem to do okay, but that separation from the parent, being difficult and seeing that anxiety on the parent and the parent having, and so in retrospect, I wish that I had been more attuned to that, because all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we're homeschooling. And so I'm like, no, I was working with her and working on these things. And then now, again, that avoidance kind of has been reinforced and whatnot. So I think that that's super important to not only be working with the child, but thinking about all the adults and how the rescuing and how, and well-intentioned, but can kind of sabotage a little bit of what we're working towards.
Yeah. I think you bring up such an important point too, and we talk about this on our teams all of the time, right? There are barriers when it comes to reducing accommodations. And one of the things we experience a lot is challenges with parents, right? Because as parents, and I can say this as a parent, right? I said this earlier, seeing your child suffering is so incredibly painful. And so sometimes it's even giving parents the distress tolerance skills to say, like, this is going to be hard. This is going to feel so uncomfortable. And I promise you can do this. I'm going to give you the skills to get through. You can call me, whatever it is in terms of supporting the parents, because part of that is they don't have, right? They don't have the distress tolerance skills to manage when their child is struggling. And that is no fault to theirs, right? It's so hard to be a parent and so hard to see your child suffering. So I think too, even having that perspective for me as a psychologist working with families is, we're not just working with a child, right? We're also really supporting the family in navigating these challenges too. And these systems are so embedded. And so how do we kind of engage the parents in the work that we do? And sometimes the answer is validation, right? We need to validate our students who are suffering, and we need to validate parents too, because it is really hard.
We had some great questions in the chat, and I want to try to summarize the last one because I'm aware we're coming up close to our time, and I want to be respectful of your time. But one of our viewers asked, given current resources or lack thereof, as well as the high number of students experiencing mental health issues, what would a holistic school-wide program look like? And it just makes me think of implementation in general. There's so many barriers to getting it in the door and then implementing it after that. What do you think? What is your advice to school psychologists out there that would love to bring DBT in schools to their school?
I would say kind of first things first, right? Going through a training and getting that kind of comprehensive training in DBT. We offer 4-day trainings at CBC. That can be a start for you as a clinician to even just start bringing in some of the skills and the language and the interventions that you can do individually or with groups. You're right, Rebecca. Implementation it's a lot. There's a big commitment there, and we have seen so much effectiveness when it comes to implementing once we kind of work through all those barriers. So, if your school district is interested in bringing DBT into your schools, contacting us at CBC. We do trainings for school districts. Then what that looks like is we kind of set up certain teams who will implement and run small groups if we're going to do it kind of at the tier 2, tier 3 level. We train staff in how to structure those groups, how to set them up, and how to implement the curriculum. And then we do ongoing consultation team to support the clinicians. We call it therapy for the therapists, right? Giving support and also really building their skills to implement. And it takes time. Implementation doesn't happen in 1 year, right? Like it's a slow process. We say culture change with DBT takes 3 to 5 years. And so it is a commitment. And what we know is it is really effective.
Question, tier 1, who is primarily implementing that? Is that, a school psychologist going into classrooms, or is that a classroom teacher who is being coached and taught to implement these things?
It could be any of those, right? It could be school clinicians, it could be school counselors and the teams that we work in, social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, interns, special ed teachers, gen ed teachers. That also, Rachel, goes back to implementation and training, right? Having the skills and needing to do so. But to start off, typically we found success in the way we did it at the counseling level, right? Being able to utilize it in individual and in group, and then being able to push it out universally. It can certainly be done at the universal level too. But that goes back to like, what are the competing demands in your district right now, right? Is there initiative fatigue? How it cut into instructional time, admin and staff buy-in, right? There's a lot multifaceted for implementation, but it's resources and availability in terms of being able to do so. It's a very DBT answer. It's not.
I know we're running out of time, and I really would love to maybe have you both on again if there's time, down the road or next season. I would love to talk more about validating identities and some of that work, and the second presentation that you did at NIASP. I learned a lot just going through the slides and then emailing with you, Minu, afterwards. So I think that would be fantastic. I know we won't have a whole lot of time to get into that tonight, but would love to talk further with you both about that.
We would love that. It's been such an honor to be here. I just want to say, like, when I started my career, listening to school psych podcasts and Rebecca following your site, I'm honored and humbled. And it's just been so great to connect and be here. And I love training with Lindsay. I know she's totally up for it.
We love talking about this. So we're happy to come back.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, that would be great. I would love to follow up with what Eric just said. And we'd love to grab our guest at the end and like rope them into a second. So we'll email you right after this episode and make that announcement to you viewers out there so you know when to tune back in. There was so much to cover to lay the groundwork, and I'd love to ask you more about the specifics of getting these skills to kids. So thank you for agreeing. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know there was another question about teaching this at the university level and the importance of that. And I know Rebecca and Eric, they have a million more questions because they're super knowledgeable about some of this and then interested. And so I would very much, look forward to another episode if we can snag you. So I like it. Let's see, look into our calendar, everybody. I think our next episode is with Rebecca Brandstetter. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to pull that up. That is on the 19th. So that will be exciting to touch base with her again, the other Rebecca, and see what she's up to. But yeah, thank you so much. Any other last minute thoughts or anything? I think that was awesome.
Just your website, CBC, if people are looking for more information and training, CBC New York, I can't quite remember.
Yes, we're also, CBC also takes interns and postdocs and externships. So if anyone is interested, you can reach out to us and we will share that information with Chad Bryce, who leads that team up.
Wonderful.
And Erin,
Thank you so much.
cbcpsychology.com.
CBC Psychology. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll put that in the chat too. But thank you so much. And hopefully we'll touch base again and do part 2. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Okay.